Good morning, everyone. At this time, if you'll stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have Commissioner Brecken joining us on Teams, so Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine? Here. Commissioner Hogue?
Here.
Commissioner Barrows?
Here.
Commissioner Coring?
Here.
Commissioner Brecken?
Here.
Our first item of business is open forum. If there's anyone on the line or in the room who would like to speak on any subject other than our printed agenda, this is your opportunity. Anyone that wishes to speak? Third call, anyone that wishes to speak? We'll move on to item number 3, which is the review and approve of the minutes from May 11th, 2021.
So moved.
Commissioner Franzine makes the motion. Commissioner Coring seconds the motion. Therese, if you'd call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hogue?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. Review and approve the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Hogue, second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hogue?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. Number 5, our consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Franzine, second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you would call the roll call once again.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hogue?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That passes. We have a public hearing at 9:05. It's not quite 9:05, so we'll move to item number 7. The first one, 7.1, is the Wetland Conservation Act. Mr. Free, out.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. First item we have here for Land Services is a request to administer the Wetland Conservation Act for the city of Ironton. The last time I was in front of the board to talk about administering the cities for the Wetland Conservation Act was November of 2019. I think that's significant because at that time we were asked by a number of cities in the county to take over administration of the Wetland Conservation Act. In fact, there were 12 of them at that time. However, not all of the cities at that time elected to have the county administer WACA. And in fact, there were 7 or 8 of them at the time that chose to remain as their own and have their own consultant do that. So we received a resolution from the city of Ironton recently to ask the county to take over WAC administration beginning in 2021. We got that in April. We're not obligated by the state of Minnesota to administer the Wetland Conservation Act. So this is an ask. If the board votes no, the city would be obligated to do it through whatever means necessary. Typically that would involve hiring a professional to administer it for them. If you choose to accept this, we would roll them in under a flat fee annual of $500 under a low intensity management. We have 3 tiers of categories of cities, 2,000, 1,000, and 500 based on relative activity of the Wetland Conservation Act in this city. If you approve this, there will be left with only 6 cities that are basically on their own for Wetland Conservation Act administration. So that's it for some background. Otherwise, we'd be looking to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Brecken, any questions?
Well, does that $500 cover our expenses?
So the $500 is intended to cover the expenses, Commissioner, the $500 is intended to capture the expenses that aren't specific fees for applications. So there are different processes and permits that you would obtain for certain things you're doing in wetlands, and we have a specific fee attached to those. But enforcement calls, phone calls, some other things don't have fees attached to them, so we designed the $500 to capture the other things we're already doing that wouldn't be captured in a fee application. So that's a long answer to a short question. I would say yes, it does.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If there's no questions, I'd make the motion to approve.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you'd call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Brecken,
Aye.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine. Aye. Commissioner Barrows.
Chair votes aye. That motion passes.
All right,
Jake.
thank you. All right, the next item.
At this time, Jake, I believe it's past 9:05, so I think we'll go back to item number 6 on our agenda.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to open the public hearing for the Minnesota Deed Small Cities Development Program block grants for broadband infrastructure.
Motion by Commissioner Coring.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hoag. Therese, if you'd call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine. Aye. Commissioner Brecken,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. The public hearing is open. Administrator Houle.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the Small Cities Development Grant Program is a grant program that we have used in the past. We have used it for economic assistance. We've done some rehabilitation work with it. One of the allowable uses of those funds is for broadband as well. The local telephone co-op, Consolidated Telephone Company, would like to submit a grant, and because this is the Small Cities Development Program, it would need to be the county or some other unit of government that would be the grant applicant. Typically, in a grant this size, people ask us to do it. I checked with finance about whether or not we can do this or not. They were okay with it. Basically, CTC is committing to taking care of all the administrative work associated with the grant. We're going to have to review that before we sign it and send it in. That would be our commitment. Christy Westbrock with CTC is here, and I would like her to maybe just give you the background, the presentation on what it is that's being proposed, and I'm sure there may or may not be anybody who wishes to comment beyond that.
Okay. Good morning.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for your foresight on the last projects we worked on through the CARES Fund. They turned out to be a wonderful success with our take rates extremely high, bringing high-speed internet to areas that just had no service. They were able to use their telemedicine. We heard a lot from seniors being able to do their appointments in their homes, the kids with their education. This is a little bit of a different opportunity that we'd like to talk to you about today. As Tim said, this is a one-time funding opportunity. There's $25 million available for the state, and it's a max of a $5 million grant that can be awarded. The target is for low to moderate income areas, and you have to show that you have 51% of that in the area that we're applying for. The applications are due soon, June 1st, and eligible applications are non-entitlement jurisdictions, including general, local government, which do not receive CDBG funds directly from HUD. So, for example, Crow Wing County fits into this program. The roles and responsibilities are going to be management and oversight, financial management, the grant agreement, and then experienced administration. CTC will provide the majority of the administration based on our experience with the Minnesota Development Grants and other federal grant processes that we've been a part of. In our opinion, we can take on as the majority of all of the administrative work to keep that out of the hands of the employees of the county. So our roles and responsibilities is to define the project area, which I'll show you, prepare the grant application, submit the application on behalf of Crow Wing County, And if awarded, CTC will oversee the entire project, including construction, permitting, all the necessary work and agreements. We'll manage this under the Davis-Bacon wage requirements. We'll prepare necessary reporting and comply with the grant agreements for Crow Wing County, and we will own and maintain the fiber network and make sure that our services are exceptional for the people in those areas. So specifically, I'd like to show you where this project resides. You'll see towards the middle of the yellow area that's trommeled off, you'll see Cuyuna, and then down towards the bottom, you can see it bunches up against Riverton and the Crosby area. And so the low and moderate income of this area meets the requirement of 51.86%. The project cost is $5,043,640. The source of funds would be a grant through the state of $4,495,000, and then CTC would contribute $548,000 as a match to the grant. We are focusing only on the unserved areas. In this specific project area, there's 919 homes that would receive service, and out of those, 492 of those homes are unserved with broadband today. And so you will see that the area around Crosby and Ironton is cut out of the project. That's because they're considered served constituents today, and so we're not eligible to apply for grant funding in those areas where they already have those services. We do, however, have to connect back to our office in Crosby, so we'll have to plow a line through there, but not for the purpose just to get to the last mile of the user. And with that, I'm open to any questions or comments.
I will say real quickly that I think this is a great project. I think it's a great area to put these lines into, so I personally, I support this. I think in our, to your point, the last experience we had was terrific with your company, and we appreciate everything that you and your employees did. So any other questions or comments? Commissioner
Mr.
Corey?
Chair, you just kind of took my thunder, but that's okay. But I just want to say thanks to you and all your staff, because this last, this last little round of work that you did helped out some of my constituents down in southern Crow Wing County, and I really appreciate it. I know that they appreciated it because I heard from them. So you guys continue to be on the cutting edge, way ahead of everybody else, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My sincere thanks.
Just maybe
Commissioner
a
Holt?
quick question. I don't know if you can answer, but if the applications are in June 1st, when do they award the grants?
My understanding is they want to get these awarded as soon as possible, so we're thinking by the end of July that they would be awarded. And we'd like to make this work for the summer.
Oh, so yeah, this summer you would
Yep.
begin?
We, equipment is in high demand right now. We're seeing lead times all the way out to a year out. So what we did was we overstocked inventory for this summer to ensure that if we did get any of these projects or any additional Recovery Project Act monies, that we'd be able to deploy immediately.
And then how do you arrive at 919 homes?
Sure. So it's split out by census blocks, and so then in the GIS system that we use with the county data, we go by the number of passings. And so it would be 919 passings, which could be a home or a business. Primarily in this area, it's homes. But in some cases, you might see that it's like a farmstead that nobody's living in or something like that. We just can't tell that completely from the GIS data, but that's where we get those numbers.
Okay.
Commissioner Brecken, any questions?
No.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no more questions, I would so move that we close the public hearing on the Minnesota Deed Small Cities Development Program block grants for broadband infrastructure.
Second.
Motion, 1 second. Administrator Hubel?
Mr. Chair, point of order, you should ask for public input.
Right.
What did he say?
We need to ask for public input. So if there's anybody out there that would like to speak to this, now would be the time to click in. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the broadband grant? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thought
I was
I
forgotten
remember
for
who
a
I
minute.
started with.
Chair votes aye. That motion passes, and a big thank you to your company for stepping forward and going after these dollars. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My sincere thanks to all of you.
Let him do this.
Mr. Old?
What's that?
You can do this motion.
Now we're approving.
Now they're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, okay, sure.
Right, so
I would
we've got-
make the motion to approve the grant application for,
Motion by Commissioner Hoag to approve the grant,
Second.
second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye, and that motion passes. Mr. Free, you're back on for the Mississippi River Brainerd Watershed, the one plan resolution to support that development.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Pleased to be here again this morning for another One Watershed, One Plan development process. I know Chris Pence, who's a board conservationist with the Board on Water Soil Resources. I believe he's listening or joining us online, so really glad to have our partners with us. And I believe Melissa Bark with our Crowing SWCD, another great partner. She's a district manager, may be listening as well. So they're joining me this morning. The request that we have here is the Mississippi River Brainerd Watershed, One Plan. As you know, we've approved some time ago the Pine River One Watershed, One Plan, and to date that's been going well and has, by all accounts, been successful to date. And thanks in large part to our great partners. What we have here is a planning process. There's a request for proposal that's due on June 11th that Crowing SWCD is spearheading with Melissa and her team to submit a proposal to start the development of that One Watershed, One Plan for that Brainerd watershed. And so what we're looking to do is get support from the county board in form of a resolution for the development of that plan. The request today is not to approve the plan, to be clear. It's just to build support for the start of the development of that plan. Crow Wing County is in 34% of that watershed. It might be good, Therese, if we could probably pull up packets page 86. There you go. That's probably a good shot of the watershed. So the center portion of the screen there, you can see that Mississippi River Brainerd one really runs right through the heart of Crow Wing County. Over 50% of Crow Wing County by acreage, 368,626 acres consist of that watershed in Crow Wing County. 75% of it is in private ownership. Both the city of Baxter and the city of Brainerd are supporting this planning process. Todd, Morrison, Aiken counties and the Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as Crow Wing County, are going to be involved in this planning process. I would estimate this to take about roughly 1.5 to 2 years to get through the process. All of the counties and the SWCDs informally have agreed that we're going to use a collaboration model that's similar to the Pine River watershed with the other 7 cities in the county as well. We're going to be using the same methods we've used on all of our One Watershed, One plans, which means we're going to prioritize, target, and measure conservation activities, which I think is a very good model for others to follow as well. And we are going to do that in order to be a vehicle to receive clean water dollars through the state of Minnesota. That would be grant funding to implement this process. We're going to have a policy committee that'll be formed consisting of 1 county commissioner and a soil and water conservation district supervisors from each county. And then the policy committee has recommendation authority, but not absolute authority. So again, just like with the Pine River, final authority on these plans is going to rely on the county board and the respective districts. So again, this is just support to begin the process in the form of a resolution. And with that, I'll either look for a motion or take any questions you have at this time.
One quick thing, Ms. Barrick, do you have anything you'd like to add to what's been said?
I don't. The only thing is this isn't guaranteed that we'll get the grant funds this round to begin the planning process. So this is just basically supporting this effort, and then we would be notified sometime in August or September if we were awarded the grant funds to begin the planning process.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Pence, you're on the line.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Anything that you would like to add?
I think it's just important to remember that this planning process, as we go through it, is you're working with landowners on a voluntary basis. So it's voluntary conservation, and the planning process itself is voluntary. But I'm also very excited to begin working with Crow Wing and its partners on this watershed planning opportunity. So I look forward to the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners,
Mr. Chair.
go ahead, Mr. Coring. Commissioner Coring. Sorry.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would move the resolution to support the Mississippi River Brainerd Watershed 1 plan.
Motion by Commissioner Coring to approve.
I just
Have a
had
second, and
question.
then
Okay.
we'll go on to
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hoag. Commissioner, you have a question?
Yeah, for Jake. How many, if I remember, how many of these watershed districts are we potentially creating that fall within Crow Wing County boundaries?
So Commissioner, and I think actually, and we can probably pull up the map again, Therese, but I believe it's 5 in Crow Wing County that touch Crow Wing County's boundaries.
And I guess my question maybe then goes to why can't we form one district that just covers Crow Wing County instead of having 5 separate districts, if you will, that cover just certain areas of the, how is that determined, I guess, is maybe my question. How do we determine the boundaries of these districts?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and they're hydrologic units. They're watersheds, so they're formed by different areas that water is going to flow to, and different areas that they form basins in. And so it's rather than political boundaries or county boundaries that sometimes don't follow those natural on the grounds or aquifer areas. They're following areas where different landforms and different features of waters naturally flow to. So in that respect, these different watershed boundary lines reflect more naturally the patterns on the landscape that lend itself towards different water quality features that need to be protected. So that's a little bit. And Melissa, I don't know if you have any other information that would help on that one, or maybe Chris that can help answer that.
Mr. Chair and members, great question. One of the things I think about specifically with the Pine River, if you look at the Whitefish chain, the Pine River actually drains into the Whitefish chain, and as a sense of conservation, if we're not focusing on the Pine River, we can't really focus on some of the issues or concerns related to the land use and the water quality, because that water flows from Cass County to Crow Wing County. And so the same thing with this watershed. We have areas of Aiken that drain into it, and if we're not looking at it as like a holistic approach, we may be missing opportunities to be able to improve or maintain what we have, because we're not including those other areas that are potentially impacting the downstream users.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns? We have a motion and a second. Therese, if you'd call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Brecken,
Aye.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. 7.3, Mr. Simonson, cooperative agreement with the DNR to improve county public water access sites.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So we have numerous county-managed public water accesses that we manage, and back at the January Natural Resource Advisory Committee, the committee approved making updates to an informal access in Center Township off of the Sorensen Road. It's on the Mississippi River. And previously, it was just an old logging road that people would drive down and use for a carry-in for a canoe or a small boat. And so what we have for you today is an agreement with the DNR that would allow cost sharing to make improvements. The DNR will provide planks, and we've also identified 2 other county managed accesses that need new planks, Gilbert Lake and CB Lake. And so this agreement before you today would allow us to get cost sharing and the DNR to provide planks for all 3 of those accesses. So, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
When
Coyne?
you say planks, is that the concrete?
Yep, those concrete that would be installed below the water, or
Okay.
above and below, yep.
Commissioner Hoag?
Ryan, there was mention, I think, at the meeting that that particular landing was too shallow to get a boat through. Have we looked into that before we?
We're going to advertise it as carry-in only because depending on the water levels, it can be too shallow at times. So it's best we're going to advertise it like a carry-in, so canoes or.
So with that, you said you're installing planks though?
Correct.
So what would you need those for a walk-in type?
Well, sometimes the water's high enough where you could get a boat or a smaller boat on a trailer. You could traditionally back it in during those high water levels. Yep.
It's kind of hit and miss based on the, okay.
Yep.
Hearing nothing else, I'd look for a motion to approve entering into the agreement with the state of Minnesota.
I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion. Commissioner Coring seconds that motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye on that. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. 7.4, Public Water Access Land Use Cooperative Agreement with the state of Minnesota. Ms. Shea.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This agreement between the state of Minnesota, the DNR, and Crow Wing County is for our portable decontamination unit and signs that we are installing at some of our accesses. The decontamination unit we purchased in 2020, and we got a permit to have that on 5 DNR accesses, or DNR-owned accesses last year. And this agreement came about when we went to get the permit to install these signs, advertising our decontamination units. We needed a permit for all of these signs to be at the DNR accesses as well. So they suggested that instead of doing a permit for all of these things every year, we go through with this agreement, which is good for 20 years. And then we only need to amend it or update it if we were to purchase another decon unit. If we want to add signs to more landings in future years, we do not have to amend it. We just need to request written agreement from Wade with the DNR. These signs are going to be put up at all 42 accesses within our Crow Wing County AIS program. 29 of them are DNR owned, 2 are county owned, and then there's a few that are city owned or Corps of Engineers owns them. And I think that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Questions or concerns? Hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve going into the 20-year cooperative agreement with the state of Minnesota.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion to approve, second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. Thank you very much. County Sheriff. Would you like to speak on behalf of the County Sheriff? Good day, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. County Attorney, Mr. Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. I have nothing for you this morning, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Administrator Houle.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, yesterday there was a senior management team meeting, and we got another COVID vaccination update. We did agree we're going to switch to once a month on those updates. We had been doing them every other week at SMT meetings, and we're going to be switching that to once a month. We started a discussion about budget pressures for the 2022 budget process. It seems like we're almost always in budgeting, but it's time for us to start that process. So talked a little bit yesterday about some of the pressures that we anticipate. And it's, I think, helpful for the SMT to hear from each other about what the competing pressures are between and among them. At the end of the day, I think it's much healthier for the organization if they understand those competing pressures, because that's what you have to do, is balance those. And so I want them to see what you see. And so we continue those conversations. We also had a conversation about PTO and comp banks. COVID provided some challenges for us in that. And we had a number of instances where people were bumping up against their max, and some event was happening during COVID, and we couldn't let them go. And so we bumped over those maximums temporarily. And so our conversation now is really, how do we get back under those maximums? And we have a plan to get back under them. So I think it was a temporary kind of a situation that hopefully is resolved. We'll see. We talked a little bit more about Personnel Committee, and based on our last Personnel Committee meeting, just trying to make sure that we have budget amendment forms for you whenever there are personnel-related staffing cost changes. And really it's me, it's Mel, making sure that the materials come in. It's also the SMT members. And so we asked for their assistance to make sure that we get good materials in your hands when we go to personnel. Scott talked a little bit about a scam that was going on in our community for veterans. And as I understand it, and Andy may know more about it than I do, but as I understand it, it was really trying to tug at the heartstrings of veterans to help out another veteran in crisis. And so just want to remind all of our listeners today, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. If it sounds like a scam, it probably is. Call someone and verify. It's really unfortunate when we talk to folks. Scott was telling us about somebody who had been swindled out of about $60,000.
Wow.
Wow. And so be careful. So that's the things we talked about. I'm happy to answer questions about the SMT meeting, if you have any.
Questions for Administrator Houle?
The only question, Tim, is you said pressures. Any examples of any pressures that you could cite now, or?
Our public health team is a good example, probably. For a while there, it was all hands on deck, and we really didn't have much of a choice. The workload was there, the need was there, and so vacation is subject to the service needs of the employer. It is very difficult, however, to tell someone, well, you can't leave on vacation, and you're going to lose time because we need you here. So temporarily, we allowed flexibility.
Okay.
Seeing no others?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I also have enclosed in your packet a request for board action to appoint Jamie, oh my goodness, I'm not going to pronounce that right, Huckride?
I thought Hucridi, I'm not
Okay.
sure either, but
To appoint Jamie as the District 2 representative, replacing Mike Dubé on the Transportation Advisory Committee. That is an appointment you can make, Mr. Chair, if you are so inclined.
and I will make that appointment for District 2, Mr. Hucridi. We apologize if the pronunciation isn't correct. But with that, is there any other announcements? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Franzine,
Second.
second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you would call the roll call for one last time, please.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.